Hello and welcome back, guys. We're now starting a new story, Iron Will, Midoriya's Armored Path, by Blue Jays. You can find author's profile link in the description. Let's begin Chapter 1, Blueprints and Bruises and a Weird Girl. The junkyard always smelled like rust and regret. Sharp air, colder than it should have been for mid-April, bit at Izuku's knuckles as he pried a bent steel plate loose with a crowbar twice his size. His gloves, worn construction ones he found in a public dumpster, hung off his hands, too big to grip properly, but they kept his skin from splitting. Mostly. Another tug. Another grunt. The plate tore free with a screech. Izuku fell backward into the dirt, coughing at the plume of dust and ash it kicked up. "Ow," he muttered, sitting up and rubbing his shoulder. The bruises from earlier hadn't stopped aching yet. Neither had his ribs. A low crackle buzzed from the radio clip to his hoodie. Endeavor engaging suspect on Route 3, fire-based attacks confirmed. Citizens advised to clear the area immediately. Izuku wiped his nose on his sleeve and reached into the shopping cart beside him. Inside, a mishmash of wires, discarded fan motors, a busted speaker, and the frame of what used to be a dishwasher. Fire-based attacks, right. He pulled out a tattered notebook from his bag, flipped past the hand-drawn schematics, and scribbled, "Need, flame insulation. Too hot, no movement. Solution. Cooling core. Check online." He tapped his pen against the page, then looked back at the sky. Orange clouds cut across it like rust veins. It had been a bad day. Bakugou hadn't just shoved him this time. He'd lit his notebook on fire, the old one, the one Izuku had filled with years of hero notes. Pages curled in on themselves as Katsuki laughed. "You can build all the fake muscles you want, Deku. Still won't make you worth a DMN." Their teacher didn't even blink. Nobody did. Back home, his room was dark except for the flickering blue of his laptop screen and the faint red glow of solder iron coils. The walls were covered in blueprints drawn on printer paper and receipts. 3 broken fans sat next to a rigged-up battery bank and a mass of copper coils. In the corner, his suit waited. The Mark I. It looked more like a torture device than armor, metal shoulder pads bolted to a utility vest, wires dangling like veins, and a prototype gauntlet on the right arm that hissed when moved too fast. Izuku slipped into it piece by piece, every movement rehearsed. It clicked and sparked. He braced himself. Then he flipped the SWCH. The hum was low, shaky. Lights flickered on across the arm. The gauntlet buzzed, locking into place. A HUD, basic, green, glitchy, projected across his left eye lens. His body trembled. The feedback through the suit made it feel like his nerves were being rerouted. Pins and needles from his shoulder to his fingertips. He grit his teeth. Pain means it's working. He ran the test behind an old store, hidden from the road. The first movement went okay. Boosters hissed faintly as he jumped. Landed. Slipped. His knee smashed into the ground. Something sparked. He groaned, reaching for the shutdown SWCH, but his hand wouldn't move. The motor had locked up. Come on, he tipped sideways, landing hard in the alley dirt. His chest ached. His leg twitched uncontrollably for a second before the core shut down with a whine and the lights blinked out. It was quiet. It was always quiet when he failed. Above him, the sky was dark. Distant stars peeked through the smog, tiny white points like blinking status lights. He didn't cry. Not this time. Just breathed. Then he whispered, "If they won't let me be a hero, I'll build my own way there." The next day at school felt like a punishment. Izuku sat near the back of the classroom, hunched low in his seat, scribbling quietly into a new notebook. His fingers still tingled from the suit's malfunction the night before, and every so often, he had to stop writing because his hand cramped too hard to hold the pen. No one noticed. No one ever did. Hey, Deku. He didn't have to look up. Bakugou's voice always carried heat. Izuku tried not to react, but it didn't matter. Katsuki was already behind him, pulling the notebook out of his hands before he could close it. What's this one? Another fantasy about joining the hero course. Bakugou flipped the book open and scoffed at the sketches. Wow, it's like watching a toddler draw robots. You think this CRP'll get you into you, eh? The class laughed. Izuku said nothing. He didn't even reach for the notebook. He knew better. The last time he did, he got burned. Literally. Bakugou held the book just long enough to tear out a few pages, blueprint drafts for his next gauntlet, and crumpled them into a ball. Then he dropped it at Izuku's feet and walked away like it meant nothing. Maybe to him, it didn't. Lunch was quieter. Izuku ate on the roof again, out of sight, out of mind. The wind tugged at his jacket. He held it closed with one hand while the other scrolled through an old support gear forum on his phone. The threads were ancient. Most had been locked or archived. But Izuku had spent so much time here, he knew every post by heart. You don't need a quirk to design genius. Power armor isn't cheating, it's evolution. You want to be like a hero. Build like one. Izuku saved that one. He read it a lot. That night, after homework and cleaning up the scorch marks from his gauntlet, he stared at the U application on his cracked laptop screen. It glowed back at him with an almost smug certainty. Support course, application in progress. He hovered the mouse over the checkbox next to Hero Course, Practical Exam. His heart hammered in his chest. He shouldn't. His armor wasn't ready. His body couldn't handle more than 5 minutes of sustained use. And even if he survived the test, even if he made it through by some miracle, he didn't have a quirk. They wouldn't accept him. Would they? But still he clicked the box. Just before bed, he sat at his workbench, goggles on, tweaking the joint regulators in his forearm. The metal sparked. His fingers trembled. But his hands kept moving. Every failure was a lesson. Every burn was progress. And every night, his dream stayed the same, to stand where heroes stood. Not as a sidekick. Not as a support tech. Not as a joke. But as someone who refused to stay down. The house was too quiet when Izuku got home. He slipped through the door like a whisper, easing it shut so the latch wouldn't click. His shoes came off quickly, tucked against the wall. He tiptoed past the living room where a blanket-covered shape curled on the couch. Inko. She always tried to wait up. Never made it past midnight. Izuku froze in the hallway and looked at her sleeping face, eyebrows drawn, mouth slightly open. Worry lines even in rest. Her hand was clenched around a photo. The frame had cracked in one corner. Izuku knew the picture well, him in kindergarten, tiny fists raised in front of a cardboard All Might costume. His mother beamed behind him, holding his shoulders. That was back when she thought he'd be a hero, too. He crept to his room and shut the door behind him. There were no posters on the walls. No All Might flags or action figures like he used to collect. Those had come down last year, the day the fourth doctor had given him that tight, practiced smile and said, "You should explore other talents. Not everyone gets a quirk." He remembered it like a gunshot. That same day, Izuku tore open an old computer tower in the school trash pile and didn't stop working for 14 hours. Flashback, 10 months ago the garage stank of sweat, solder, and shame. The Mark Zero hadn't even been armor. It was more like a cage of scrap metal bolted to a school backpack. He wore it to school once. It shorted out halfway through second PRD, burning the fabric off his shirt and electrocuting his right arm bad enough to send him to the nurse. They didn't call his mom. Nobody wanted to explain why a quirkless freak was strapping power cores to his chest like a suicide vest. After that day, Bakugou called him Iron Lump. The nickname stuck for a month. Now Izuku sat at his desk with the mark I laid out in pieces. He used a flashlight to inspect the damage from last night's failed jump. One of the servos had melted. The wiring to the leg rig was blackened, and the capacitor was completely fried. He scribbled more notes. Burnout from feedback loops. Need delay system. Gauntlet input is too sensitive. Try pressure plates or motion detection. Add armor padding, take less body shock. He stared at the notes until the words blurred. His hand spasmed again, nerves still recovering. He gripped it until the pain grounded him. Come on, he whispered. Not yet. He flipped open his laptop and reopened the UA exam requirements page. Hero course, practical exam combat and rescue evaluation. Bring appropriate gear. He scrolled down to the section on eligibility. It didn't say, must have a quirk. It just said most do. Izuku clicked open a folder labeled Iron Midoriya, private, and dragged in his updated blueprint for the arm gauntlet. He didn't know if it would work. He wasn't even sure he'd survive the exam. But he'd already made the decision. At school, the next day Izuku kept his head down through homeroom. Bakugou was quieter than usual, but his smirking glances were enough to make Izuku sweat. He checked the clock over and over. He hated lunch PRD. Hated the way people stared at him when he ate alone, hated how the whispers never stopped. But today, he felt something else. Urgency. He needed to test the new battery cell before sundown. Back in the junkyard, late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the heaps of metal. Izuku's boots crunched over broken glass as he followed the familiar path to his hidden workspace, a makeshift lean-to wedged between a rusted truck and a fence. He set his bag down and pulled the armor pieces out carefully, laying them across a blanket. The new gauntlet core was smaller. More stable. He'd shaved off over 700 grams of weight. It still needed a stress test, but it looked real. Almost like something a hero would wear. He strapped it on slowly, breathing through the sting in his fingers. Power flickered. A faint blue ring lit up around the wrist. Good. He pulled a small voice recorder from his jacket. Test log, Mark I. Battery reroute successful. Servo calibration next. I adjusted the booster move limiter to reduce spinal recoil. Hopefully, he trailed off. A clatter echoed from behind the junk pile. Izuku froze. Voices. Not many. Maybe two. You sure it was this yard? Yeah. Some nerd's been sneaking in for months. Thinks he's Tony Stark. He swore. The flashlight in his bag was still on. Panic surged in his chest. He reached for the emergency release on the suit, fingers slipping on the latch. Too slow. A silhouette appeared at the edge of the scrap pile. Hey. You back here. Izuku grabbed the blanket, threw it over the armor, and ducked behind the truck, holding his breath. Footsteps crunched closer. Then stopped. A low whistle. What the hell is all this CRP? They were right there. One more step and they'd find it. Izuku didn't blink. Didn't breathe. Finally, ugh. Whatever. Not worth it. Come on. They left. It took a full minute before Izuku stood back up, heart still pounding like a warning bell. Back at home, he couldn't sleep. Instead, he stared at the UA brochure pinned to his wall. It was old. The edges were curled. Bakugou had given it to him once, thrown it at his chest and said, maybe you can mop the halls. He'd kept it anyway. Right on the front, there was a photo of All Might. Smiling. Towering. Hopeful. Izuku stared at it for a long time. Then at the schematic beside it. Then back again. All Might had been gifted power. Izuku was going to build his. The glow from his laptop was the only light in the room. Izuku's hands were still shaking from earlier. From the almost getting caught. From the weight of it all. But he had to record his progress. Even if nobody ever saw it, he needed proof that he was trying. He logged into an old tech forum he'd been lurking on for over a year, Forge Frame. Net. It was mostly gearheads, support course dropouts, and vigilante wannabes. But the occasional genius posted there too. Threads on exocore balancing, support item legality, battery compression theory. It was the only place he ever felt smart. He opened a new post and uploaded 3 pictures, a side view of his rebuilt gauntlet, a sketch of the new booster valve, and a short video clip. He muted the audio, didn't want anyone hearing his voice. Then he typed, subject, homemade arm assist, Mark I2, been iterating for 6 months now. Still burns out after extended use, but gauntlet control has improved. Integrated a passive shock absorber core this time. Open to feedback, especially on weight distribution or recoil dampening, still can't get the pressure balance right on the wrist actuator. Green light ghost. He stared at it for a few seconds before hitting post. Then he sat back, exhaled shakily, and waited. 10 minutes later, a reply popped up. Hats. Wow, those are some nice babies. That weld on the second strut is a lil ugly, but the load sharing layout. Chef's kiss. You thought about elastic memory alloy for the wrist issue. Less torque loss, more flex response. Needs heat sinking though, or it'll melt like marshmallow hell. Trust me. P.S. If that clip's yours, your core-to-move ratio's insane. You're either suicidal or brilliant or both. Keep going, Greenie. Izuku blinked. His cursor hovered over the name. Hats. Account created 3 years ago. Hundreds of posts. Most buried deep in the advanced engineering threads. No profile pic, just a gear icon. He reread the comment 3 times. Then again. Then a smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. He quickly typed a reply, Greenlight Ghost Elastic Memory Alloy. Never worked with it, but I'll look into sourcing scrap. Thanks. You're right about the weld, I rushed that one. Didn't think anyone would notice, or care, honestly. You think the wrist mod could work even if I'm using recycled stabilizers from an old fridge motor? Another ping. Hats fridge parts. Hell yeah. Janky but spicy. Can't wait to see V1. 3 less than 3. He didn't even notice the time after that. Didn't realize his eyes were burning or that he hadn't eaten dinner. He just kept replying. Taking notes. Sketching new drafts. For the first time in a long time, it didn't feel like he was screaming into a void. Somebody had seen his work. Not just seen it, understood it. Even if they were just a name on a screen. The forum pinged again. Friend request received. Hats. Izuku stared at the notification. He didn't get friend requests. Not online. Not anywhere. His cursor hovered over the accept button for a full 10 seconds before he clicked it. Instantly, a chat bubble opened. Hats, okay, but seriously, fridge stabilizers. You're kinda my new favorite dumpster goblin. Let's make cool stuff and not explode. Probably. Izuku snorted, an actual sound of amusement slipping out before he could stop it. He covered his mouth reflexively, like someone might hear. But no one was there. He replied. Greenlight Ghost, deal. No exploding. Maybe. Thanks, Hats. He meant it. More than he knew how to say. The clock blinked 2:14 a.m. before he finally powered down the screen. He stood up too fast and swayed, lightheaded, dizzy. His hands still buzzed faintly from the pressure sensor test he'd run earlier. He winced as he peeled off his hoodie, part of it stuck to a raw spot on his shoulder, where one of the mark-eye straps had rubbed skin raw during calibration. Pain means it's working. He didn't even notice the quiet knock until the door creaked open. Inko stepped in, wrapped in a fuzzy blue robe and holding a steaming cup of tea. Her eyes were tired, but soft. "Izuku," she said gently, "you're still awake." He rubbed at his eyes and tried to smile. "Just finishing some things." "Sorry. Did I wake you?" She walked over, placed the cup on his nightstand, and sat at the edge of his bed. "No," she murmured. "You didn't. I heard you moving around." Her gaze drifted toward the blueprint wall. Then the scattered tools. The small burn marks on his desk. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then, "You've been working so hard." Izuku looked away. "I have to." Inko's hands folded neatly in her lap. "I know you do. I know how badly you want this." He braced himself. For the concern. The pleading. Just apply to the support course and be happy. But she surprised him. "I'm proud of you, you know." He blinked. "You are." She smiled. Not a big smile. Not one of those bright, everything's okay kind of smiles. But something smaller. Worn. Real. "I know I haven't always known how to help you. And I worry, Izuku. I do. I see the bruises, the cuts. The sparks coming from under your door." A pause. "But I also see the way you don't give up. The way you look at these designs like they're alive. Like they matter. And they do. Because you made them." He felt something sting at the corners of his eyes. "I don't have a quirk," he whispered. "I never will. And that's not going to change." She reached up and touched his face, brushing back a bit of messy green hair. "Then you'll change the world anyway." He swallowed hard. His voice was barely a breath. "It's going to be dangerous." "I know." She looked at him then, really looked at him. Like he wasn't a child. Like she saw the weight on his shoulders. The kind he had chosen to carry. "So promise me something, Izuku." He nodded. "Be careful. Don't let your heart outpace your body. Don't push yourself so far that you break before they ever get to see what you can do." He nodded again. It wasn't a full promise. Not really. But it was enough for now. She stood, pressed a kiss to the top of his head, and headed toward the door. Just before she closed it, she added, "No more all-nighters, okay? One of these days, you're going to short-circuit yourself." "I'll try," he said. "Good." The door shut with a soft click. The next day, Izuku skipped lunch again. He waited until the last bell rang, then slipped through the school gates with his backpack half-zipped and tools clinking faintly inside. No one stopped him. No one noticed him leave. The walk to the train station was quiet, and he didn't mind. His head was too full of wires and servo lag and battery ratios to focus on much else. He had a new idea for shock absorption in the boots. If he could find a set of soft bend springs and maybe a working vent core, he could fix the balance issues that had almost dislocated his knee last week. Maybe, he thought as the train rocked gently beneath him, Dago Beach will have something. It wasn't really a beach anymore. It was a junkyard with waves. The air hit him the second he stepped off the last boardwalk step. Salty, sharp, and tinged with the sour stink of rust and old oil. The ocean sounded tired out here, the surf dragging in like it was reluctant to touch the shore. Seagulls called overhead, and somewhere further down the coast, metal clanged against metal. He adjusted his backpack straps and picked a path through the trash. Dago Beach was a goldmine, if you knew how to look. Appliances, broken bikes, old construction equipment. Half of it was too damaged to use, but if you had patience, and gloves, you could find pieces that still had life left in them. Izuku already had a short list in his head, a mid-capacity fuse converter rubberized wiring event fan for cooling anything light enough to graft onto the mark. I framed the old vending machine someone mentioned on the forums had probably been picked clean by now, but maybe something else had turned up. He crouched near a half-sunk dishwasher and began sorting through the pile. A broken drone motor. A crushed modem. A decent-looking circuit breaker still bolted to a plastic panel. Not bad. Then, clang. A loud crash rang out from somewhere behind the next heap of scrap. Izuku tensed and dropped the panel. Clang. Clunk. Wham. He crept around the rusted edge of a truck door, moving slowly, peering through a gap in the pile. Someone else was here. A girl stood in the middle of a cleared-out patch of sand and metal, goggles strapped to her face, sleeves rolled up past her elbows. Pink hair puffed out behind her in chaotic tufts. She was wearing a heavy-duty tool belt that clanked with every step, and in her arms was a traffic light. Like an actual traffic light. Wires still dangling from the bottom like jellyfish tendrils. She held it up, grinning, and shouted into the wind. "Oh, you are gonna be appealing once I tear your guts out." Izuku blinked. Hard. What? He ducked lower on instinct, crouching behind a rusted tire rim. He didn't know whether to say something or just back away quietly. The girl set the traffic light down and immediately pulled out a cordless drill the size of a soda bottle, attacking the base with surgical precision and humming loudly as she worked. "Come on, come on, come on, don't be shy, aha. There you are, you CC little capacitor, She froze. Slowly, she turned. Her goggles sat askew now, one lens fogged over. Grease streaked her cheek. She stared at him like she was trying to decide whether he was real. "Oh. Hi. Didn't see you there." Izuku's mouth went dry. Sorry, I didn't mean to, I wasn't spying or anything, I just, I thought I was the only one here," she waved him off. "You're fine. There's plenty of junk for both of us." He nodded too quickly. "Right. I'm just salvaging." She tilted her head. "You a builder?" Izuku paused. "Yeah," he said, a little quieter. "I build things." Her smile stretched into something wide and slightly unhinged. "Me too. Mostly gear. Weapons. Jetpacks that mostly explode on purpose. Sometimes trap gloves." "Trap gloves?" "Yup. Gloves with springs and wire teeth. Real crowd pleasers." Izuku didn't know what to say to that. He just gave a weak nod. She didn't seem to mind. She turned back to her pile and resumed digging through the light's casing, muttering happily to herself. He edged a little closer, still unsure if this was a talking situation or a pretend we're both invisible one. They worked in tandem for a while, without really saying anything. Izuku stuck to his side of the beach, occasionally glancing over. She didn't seem to notice. She moved like chaos incarnate, pulling out scrap pieces, holding them up to the sun, talking to them like they were pets or puzzle pieces. At one point she yelled, "Yessssssss," so loudly a gull dropped a can mid-flight and flew off screaming. Izuku found a battery core from a scooter, a snapped stabilizer rod, and a promising alloy panel with minimal corrosion. Nothing amazing. But usable. He was just brushing sand off the shock casing when her voice cut through the wind again. "Hey. Handsome green bean." Izuku froze mid-squat. He turned, slowly. She was waving at him from the top of a collapsed pile of metal, holding what looked like the gutted skeleton of a space heater. "Mind giving me a hand? This little baby's caught on something and I need, like, slightly less gravity or a second set of hands, whichever comes first." Izuku hesitated. Then nodded and picked his way over. She stepped aside and gestured toward a mess of tangled wires, twisted piping, and a half-buried rusted shelving unit. "She's appealing, right?" Izuku tilted his head. Okay, technically she's the ventilation housing off an old wall unit, but with the right base plate and a power loop, she could be the lungs of a shock vent chest plate. I've been trying to make one that won't melt the user's ribs. Not that I've tested that, exactly, but you know. Theory. She gave him a wide, unabashed grin. Izuku blinked. I can lift it. Perfect. I'll shout unnecessary encouragement while you do. He got into position, gripped the edge of the wedged vent, and heaved. The metal groaned under his fingers as rust flaked away. Almost there, she chirped. You're doing amazing, mystery mechanic. With a final grunt, Izuku managed to tip the whole thing just far enough for Mei to wiggle her heater piece free. She held it aloft like it was a golden idol. Yes. You're a lifesaver. I owe you, big time. She slung it under her arm and offered him her free hand. Thanks again. That one's gonna be a beast once I graft a regulator onto it. Or possibly a flamethrower. Flamethrower? Izuku asked, still catching his breath. Oh yeah, she said cheerfully, not for offense, just for flair. You know, like a warning. Don't touch me or I'll flambe your kneecaps. Real professional stuff. He didn't really know how to respond to that, but she was already moving on, digging through the sand like a bloodhound. She's pretty weird, Izuku mumbled to himself. But weird in a way that made sense. They crossed paths again about 40 minutes later. Izuku's bag was mostly full now, battery core, shock rod, a few STRPPD wires, and he was ready to head home. She was still carting around a growing mess of parts, her hands blackened with soot, goggles pushed onto her forehead like a crown. Heading out, she asked, pushing her cart over with one squeaky wheel. Yeah, he said, adjusting his backpack. Cool. She reached out a grease-streaked hand. Name's Mei. Handsome, if you want to get formal. Izuku, he said, shaking her hand. Midoriya. She squeezed once, firm and fast, then let go. Well, Midoriya, thanks for the muscle. If my baby explodes slightly less than usual, I'll dedicate the prototype to you. He gave a soft laugh, despite himself. You're welcome. She grinned again and spun on her heel. I'll be around, she called over her shoulder. This beach has all kinds of treasures if you know where to dig, and if you don't mind getting tetanus. Izuku watched her go, her cart rattling behind her like a chariot of chaos. Weird, he thought again. But kind of cool, too. Later that night, back home, he flopped onto his bed, head spinning from sun and salt and metal fumes. He checked his phone. One new forum message. Hats, found the sexiest spring core ever today. Gonna make it purr. How's your wrist thingy coming, green light ghost? Izuku stared at the screen. Then smiled to himself. He typed back. Green light ghost, had some help today. Found good parts. I'll send you pictures after I clean the sand out of my soul. Izuku hit send and watched the screen for a second, the soft blue light casting shadows across his desk. Found good parts. I'll send you pictures after I clean the sand out of my soul. A beat passed. Then, hats, ugh, sand is the worst. It gets in the gears. In the fans. In your ER. Death to sand. Long live scrap. Izuku let out a breathy laugh, barely audible. He leaned back in his chair and stared up at the ceiling. Just a few more months before the entrance exam, he reminded himself. He knew the date by heart. He'd marked it on the wall calendar above his desk in thick red ink. Circled it 3 times. Sometimes, when the days blurred together, when the parts didn't fit right or his hands wouldn't stop shaking, he looked at that date like it was a finish line. Or maybe a starting one. He had time. Not much. But enough. Enough to rebuild the boots. Enough to test the new coil anchors. Enough to make the Mark I more than just something that limped through junk piles. He glanced at the sketch pinned to his corkboard, the half-drawn outline of a boy in armor. It didn't look like All Might. It didn't look like Iron Man, either. It looked like him. His body, his size, his scars. And maybe someday, his place among heroes. Hats. Hey Greenie, you live anywhere near Dago Beach? I've got a few of my babies acting up and I need an extra pair of hands like. Tomorrow soon. If you're free. Izuku blinked at the screen. Dago Beach again. Weird coincidence. He scratched the back of his neck, glancing toward the cluttered corner of his room where the gear he'd salvaged yesterday still sat in a pile. He didn't think much of it. The beach was public. Lots of support junkies scavenged there. Hats probably lived nearby too. Besides, he liked her projects. Even if she was a little overwhelming. He typed back, green light ghost, yeah, I can swing by. What time? Ping. Hats, noonish. Earlier if I'm feeling spicy bring gloves. One of them bites. Izuku stared at the screen for a moment before sighing through a half-smile. He didn't know who this girl was. He didn't even know her real name. But every time she messaged him, he felt like he was already in the middle of a conversation. Just some weird gearhead from the forums. Same as him. The next morning, Izuku boarded the 11:31 train with his gear bag slung tight over his shoulder and a nervous pit in his stomach. He wasn't sure why he felt jittery. It wasn't like he hadn't been to Dago Beach before. But something about meeting up with someone, even just to help with scrap, made it feel different. His train car was mostly empty. Except. Halfway down the row sat a girl. Pink hair. Goggles resting on her forehead. A stuffed tool belt resting across her lap like it was the most natural thing in the world. Izuku froze for a second before slowly walking past and slipping into a seat a few rows behind. That's the girl from the beach, he thought. The weird one who talks to her equipment. She hadn't noticed him. Or if she had, she didn't react, just kept tapping away at her phone with her thumb, a faint buzz of humming coming from her seat. He glanced at her again. What are the odds? Twice in 1 week. Just a coincidence, probably. Weird ones happened. The train swayed as they hit the next station. Neither of them moved. At the next stop, still nothing. Eventually, they both stood at the same time, exited at the same transfer, and got on the exact same connecting line, again. Izuku fidgeted with the zipper on his bag. He could have sworn she looked right at him once during the transfer, but she didn't say anything. Just gave a small nod and kept moving. By the time they reached the Dago Beach station, they ended up side by side walking down the steps. Hey, she said casually, flashing him a grin. Hi, he replied, blinking. Didn't expect to see you again. She tilted her head. Yeah, wild, right. You here for scrap too? He nodded. Something like that. Nice. She snapped on her gloves and slung the belt over her shoulder like a bandolier. Well, if you see a rogue boiler tank with a saw blade attached, that's mine. Don't touch it. Okay. She gave him a thumbs up and trotted off like this was completely normal. Izuku stood there a moment longer. Twice in 1 week. Same train, same stop. He shook his head, brushing the thought away. Weird coincidence. Izuku watched her disappear down the boardwalk, turning left toward the northern edge of the beach. He adjusted his backpack and walked the opposite way, trying not to overthink things. He picked his usual spot near the overturned shipping container, the one where the wind wasn't too brutal and the sand didn't swallow his boots. He dropped his bag and pulled out his gloves. Then his phone buzzed. Hats, hi, I'm here. Where you at, Greenie? At the exact same moment, Izuku sent, green light ghost, just got here. Where are you? They both stared at their screens. Ping. Ping. Izuku looked around, brow furrowing. Weird. She says she's here already. He typed, I'm near the big container on the north side. Red rusted one with graffiti on the corner. You. Hats, OMG same. I'm at the red box too. Near the gross bird poop part. Izuku blinked and slowly turned his head. A few yards away, near the exact spot she described, stood the pink-haired girl from the train. Kneeling next to a metal case, squinting at something in her hand. No way he stared at her, then back at his phone. Couldn't be. There's no way this random junkyard girl is the same Hats from the forums. He watched as she yanked out a piece of wire, held it up to the sun like it was treasure, and shouted, yes. Guts. You will be glorious. Izuku grimaced faintly. She definitely talks like Hats. Still, he shook the thought away. Too weird to be true. He typed, I think we're just in the same area. I'll walk around, maybe I'll spot you. Hats, cool. If you see someone yelling at scrap metal, that's probably me. He paused. Looked back up. She was now fist-bumping the traffic light casing she'd pulled apart. Nope, he decided. Couldn't be her. Izuku slipped his phone back into his pocket and slowly made his way across the sand. He wasn't sure why his legs were moving. Maybe curiosity. Maybe confusion. Maybe the fact that she'd just definitely high-fived what looked like the gutted remains of a traffic light and yelled, you appealing. Idiot, at it. By the time he reached her, she was crouched low, goggles down, muttering something about coil compression and torque resistance, while tugging at a mess of wires that looked like they'd been chewed by a blender. He cleared his throat softly. She didn't look up. He tried again. Excuse me. She turned, big grin on her face, pink hair frizzed out wildly from under the strap of her goggles. Oh hey, it's you again. Quiet guy. Izuku blinked. Yeah. Hi. I saw you on the train. She pointed at him with a screwdriver. Right. And now here. Wild. He paused, tilting his head slightly. Did you just fist bump a traffic light? Yup, she chirped proudly. She finally gave up the last of her filament rings. That's worth some respect. Izuku opened his mouth. Closed it. There wasn't really a response to that. She tugged her goggles up and wiped sweat from her brow with the back of her hand. You here to dig too? I guess. I mean, yeah. I was meeting someone, but I can help if you need, perfect. I always need help. Come here, I need someone with human-sized arms to hold this while I unscrew the belly of the beast. She handed him a cracked copper rod and gestured toward a pile of scrap with way too much enthusiasm. Izuku blinked again. Human-sized arms. He took the rod. What, exactly am I holding this for? Stability, she grinned. And maybe mild electrical grounding. But mostly stability. Grounding. Only if it shorts out. Which it probably won't. I wrapped the end in duct tape. Mostly. They worked in mostly chaotic silence for the next 20 minutes. May barked orders like a mad scientist with a deadline, and Izuku followed them, partially out of curiosity and partially because he couldn't not help when someone handed him a live wire and shouted, hold this or we die. The pile of parts at their feet had somehow become a crude, half-assembled gyroscopic frame with sparking internals and something that looked suspiciously like a hair dryer mounted to the top. Izuku squinted at the mess of exposed wires and makeshift joints. This is for one of your babies, right? Obviously. May said, grinning through a smudge of black grease. She's a thermal redirector. Or will be. Probably. If she doesn't melt. She wiped her hands on her pants and reached for another tool. Izuku hesitated, then looked at her a little more closely. Same goggles. Same grin. Same voice. Same beach. Same mess. Same everything. He swallowed once. Hey, he asked, slowly. Are you hats? She froze mid-reach. Her eyes went wide behind the lenses. Then she grinned, big and toothy and way too excited, and practically bounced on her heels. Are you Gianni? He blinked. Yeah. May let out a noise that was part squeal, part unhinged laughter. I knew it. I mean, I didn't, but I knew it. You had the energy. The quiet tinkerer who never sleeps energy. Izuku looked stunned. How did I not realize it was you? You literally watched me fist bump a traffic light, she pointed out, crossing her arms with mock offense. If that's not Hat's behavior, what is? Fair point. She leaned forward suddenly, eyes sparkling behind her goggles. This is so cool. My forum buddy is real. And also not a 40-year-old grease wizard in disguise, which, honestly, was a risk I was prepared for. Izuku laughed, a little too quickly. Yeah, I thought you were a guy named Ken with a vending machine obsession. Ken's cool. He makes bomb shock plates. But nah, you got me. She pointed both thumbs at her chest. Support genius, prototype queen, professional messmaker, May Hatsum, in the flesh. She held out a grease-stained hand. Izuku shook it. Again. Greenlight ghost, he said with a sheepish smile. But I guess you already knew that. She gave him a sharp nod. Well, Greenie, now that we've met. We're gonna build so much dangerous stuff. He gave her a wary look. Dangerous. Exciting. You said dangerous first. Same thing. They'd been digging through opposite ends of the same junk mound for a while now, Izuku quietly picking apart rusted panels for viable joints, May flinging parts over her shoulder like a kid in a candy store with zero regard for gravity. She was currently half buried inside a split refrigerator, humming some off-key tune, goggles fogged, legs kicking behind her as she dug deeper. Without warning, she called out, so hey, could I see the suit sometime? Izuku blinked, head lifting from the mess of busted capacitors he'd been sorting. Ha! She popped up from the fridge like a gremlin, holding a broken toaster and a tangled mess of wire with a triumphant grin. The one you've been working on. You know, the suit. Your armor. Your baby. I can smell the circuitry on you. He flushed. I mean, it's not really finished. Pfft, nothing's ever finished. That's the fun part. She tossed the toaster into her cart without looking. But seriously, I love seeing other people's tinkering. Show me your welds, your burns, your weird janky configurations. I promise I won't make fun unless it's really funny. He scratched at the back of his neck, unsure. It's kind of patched together. So's my whole life. Come on, Greenie. Builders gotta stick together. He stared at her. She stared back, wide-eyed, open, totally sincere despite the grease on her cheek and the bolt in her hair. Finally, he mumbled, maybe. Soon. She grinned. Soon is good. Just don't let it explode before I get a look. Then she dove back into the fridge with a shout of, oh my god, there's a working fan motor in here, and started kicking her boots in the air again like nothing happened. Izuku blinked slowly, then smiled, just a little. He was starting to like this weird girl. Chapter 2, Sparks, Suits, and Surprises. Izuku checked the clock for the 5th time in 3 minutes. He wasn't nervous, exactly. Just okay, no, he was nervous. His suit was still half disassembled on his bedroom floor, there were tool marks on his desk, and he hadn't exactly planned for company. Let alone her. May Hatsum was coming over. Like, to his house. He hadn't even known her real name until a week ago. Now she was texting him things like, "You better have snacks, I run on pure grease and sugar," and, "I need to see this baby up close, bring her into the light, Greenie." He didn't know how to emotionally prepare for someone calling his armor a baby. The doorbell rang. He almost dropped the screwdriver in his hand. "Inko," he called out, voice cracking slightly. "That's, someone for me." His mom was already moving toward the front door, apron still on and a faint smudge of flour on her cheek. "A friend?" she asked, clearly trying, and failing, to keep her excitement down. Izuku didn't answer. Inko opened the door. "Oh hey," came a bubbly voice. "You must be Izuku's mom. Whoa, you look just like him, but rounder and softer." "That's a compliment, by the way. Hi, I'm Hatsum, your son's tech buddy / unofficial gear gremlin." Inko blinked. "You're a girl. Last I checked." Mei said brightly, stepping in with a box of tools under one arm and a bag of snacks in the other. "Where's my boy genius? I need to see this armor baby." Stat. Inko turned slowly toward the hallway. "Izuku," she called, her voice strangled by the force of maternal excitement. "Your friend is here." He shuffled out a second later, face red and eyes wide behind his glasses. Hey. You, made it." "Of course I did," Mei said, breezing past him like a storm wrapped in boots and belts. "Now take me to the goods." Inko stood there, frozen in the hallway, watching as the girl who absolutely did not stop to take her shoes off vanished into Izuku's room like she'd been there 100 times. She stared at her son. "You made a friend," she whispered. Izuku sighed. "Please don't, and she's a girl." He groaned and followed after Mei. Mei gasped so hard when she saw the armor that Izuku visibly flinched. "Oh. My. Gear." She dropped her snack bag on his desk and practically dove for the gauntlet casing. "This is so much better than I imagined, Greenie. Look at these stabilizers. Are these fridge brackets? You madman." Izuku scratched at the back of his neck, face burning. "They were the only ones I could get to mount without torque slippage, you genius little goblin." Mei was already kneeling on the floor, tracing her fingers over the boot rig. "You're using dual shock coils with manual override toggles. Do you want your knees to survive, or is this like a one-way trip into legend?" It's still in progress," he muttered. "That's the mark I swapped out the shoulder plates for something lighter and added dampeners to the spine brace, but the left arm's been glitching since I rerouted the battery cable. It might fry again if okay," she cut in, slapping her hands on her knees. 1. I love you. 2. That's a terrible battery layout. Let me help." He stared at her. "What?" "The exam's coming up, right?" she said, already rummaging through her own toolbox. "I don't know if you've run a full stability test, but these joints'll blow your balance if you boost while pivoting left. I can fix it in like 10 minutes. 15 if we make it secretary. You don't have to, please. This is the most fun I've had all week, and yesterday I built a drone that screams when it gets shot." Izuku opened his mouth. Then closed it. He stepped aside as she pounced on the leg module with a wrench and a manic grin. "You know," she said while digging through wires, "if you reinforce the inner boot frame with an offset bolt bracket, you'll get better spring recoil without sacrificing toe flex. You know a lot about recoil springs." "I am a recoil spring," she replied, proudly. For a while they worked in tandem. Izuku handed her wires. She soldered like she was born holding a torch. Her goggles kept fogging up and she didn't seem to care. Then, mid-tinker, she suddenly stopped. She glanced up. "Wait." Izuku looked up from his notebook. "What?" She squinted at him. "You're upgrading for the entrance exam, right?" "Yeah, the entrance exam." "Yeah." She blinked once. Slowly. Then tilted her head. Wait, wait, wait. Are you applying for the support course or the hero course? Izuku hesitated. Her eyes widened. Oh my dear. You're going for the hero course. He nodded, sheepish. I mean. I want to try. Mei sat back on her heels. Then she smiled. Big. Bright. Almost manic. You're even cooler than I thought. They sat cross-legged on the floor now, the half-dismantled leg module between them, tools scattered like candy across the carpet. Mei had just finished realigning one of the stabilizer joints when she leaned back and tilted her head. Hey, if you don't mind me asking, she began, voice casual, eyes curious. What's your quirk, Greenie? Izuku froze for half a second. Mei kept talking, not noticing. Mine's called zoom. I can see stuff that's really far away, super clear. Like, crazy telescopic levels. That's why my eyes look like this. She leaned in, way too close, and pointed both index fingers right at her pupils, which had faint concentric rings that almost glowed under the light. They adjust super fast when I focus. Kind of freaky, right? Izuku blinked. Then smiled, a little shyly. Oh. That's why they look so cool. I thought they were contacts or something. She beamed. Nope. 100% natural tech goggles. His smile faltered slightly. He looked down at his hands. I'm quirkless, he said quietly. The word sat there between them, heavier than any armor. He waited. Waited for her to laugh. Or pull back. Or say oh. Or worse, call him something cruel. Quirkless loser. Dead weight. Something he'd heard before. But nothing came. Just silence. He chanced a glance up. Mei was still sitting there, goggles pushed up, her fingers still holding a screw between them. Then, slowly, she tilted her head again. Ha. That was it. Just, ha. She reached over and poked him lightly in the forehead with her screwdriver. Then you're even more impressive, she said matter-of-factly, like it wasn't even up for debate. You built all this without a quirk backing you up. That's badass. Izuku stared at her. Mei just shrugged, already turning back to the armor. People think quirks are everything. But I've seen guys with perfect tech get beat by overconfident meatheads. You're thinking. You're adapting. You're building something with your bare hands. She gave him a sideways grin. That's real power, Greenie. Izuku didn't know what to say. So he didn't. But his chest felt warmer. A little lighter. Like something uncurled inside it. He reached for a socket wrench and held it out to her. Want to reattach the boot plate? Do I ever? They kept working in a comfortable rhythm for a few minutes. The leg module was nearly reassembled now, cleaner, more balanced, a little less likely to snap Izuku's ankle on a bad landing. He glanced over at her as she tightened the final screw with practiced ease. So, he asked softly, I'm guessing you applied for the support course. She looked up, eyes wide. Then her whole face lit up. Of course I did, she beamed. Where else would I go? I want the whole world to see my babies. She tapped the boot frame affectionately. Every prototype, every upgrade, every glorious combustion, I want them out there, on Heroes, in the field, changing the game. Izuku blinked. That's, actually kind of inspiring. Kind of. Greenie, I want to change the way support tech is viewed. I want engineers to be rock stars. I want babies like this, she gestured wildly to his half-finished armor, to be on magazine covers. She paused, then added seriously, I want heroes to stop thinking they're alone. Because they're not. Not when they've got us. Izuku just stared at her for a second. Then, quietly, he said, "You're really something else." She grinned like he'd just given her a trophy. "I get that a lot." May leaned back, letting out a satisfied sigh as she admired their progress. "Honestly," she said, wiping her hands on her pants, "I was kinda hoping we'd be in the same class. You know, at UA." Izuku looked up from where he was adjusting the boot plate. She shrugged, a faint little smile tugging at the edge of her mouth. "But you're going for the hero course, and I'm obviously support. So, guess not." Her voice stayed bright, but there was something softer underneath. Then she perked back up almost instantly. "Oh well. I'll still be rooting for you, no matter what, Greenie." Izuku's chest did that fluttery thing again. He smiled. "Thanks. I applied for the support course too. Just in case." May blinked. "Wait, really?" "Yeah. I mean, if I don't make it into the hero course, I'd still want to build. And maybe learn from people like you." May stared at him for half a second. Then she spun around on her knees, lunged across the scattered tools, and grabbed his face between both gloved hands. "You're gonna make it in the hero course," she declared, eyes locked onto his like she was drilling her will straight into his soul. "Me," she said, jabbing a thumb at herself, "and this appealing baby you built," she gestured wildly at the armor, "are gonna make sure of it." Izuku didn't move. Or blink. He was frozen in place, eyes wide, cheeks burning, hands hovering awkwardly like he wasn't sure if he was supposed to hold a wrench or breathe. Then she suddenly let go, turned back toward the suit, and held out her hand. "Now hand me that wrench, mine's too big." "Right," Izuku said, voice squeaking slightly as he scrambled to grab it. "Why yeah. Wrench. Here." She snatched it, already tightening a bolt like nothing had just happened. Izuku sat there, stunned, smile still lingering on his lips. And for the first time in a while, he let himself believe it, maybe, he really could make it. They were still elbow-deep in bolts and wires when the sound of soft footsteps approached the room. Inko knocked gently before peeking her head in, smiling. "Hey," she said, "you two want some food? Dinner's ready." Before Izuku could even open his mouth, May zipped past him, all spring-loaded excitement and oil-streaked energy. "Yes please," she cried, practically throwing her gloves onto the floor as she bolted into the hallway. And then, she hugged Inko. Just wrapped her arms around her like she'd known her for years. "You're a lifesaver, Midoriya-san. I've been running on grease fumes and sugar packets all day." Inko blinked once, caught off guard. Then smiled, slowly, and gently patted May's back. "Well, I hope you like katsudon. I made extra." "Love katsudon," May said as she marched off to the dining table, already pulling her goggles up and sniffing the air like a bloodhound. "Smells like edible science." Izuku stood in the doorway, eyes wide. Inko turned and looked at him, one eyebrow raised, the smile still playing at the corner of her lips. "She's energetic." Izuku nodded. "Yeah. She hugged me." "Yeah. Is she always like this?" He sighed. "Pretty much." Inko paused, then reached up to gently straighten his hair. "I like her." Izuku's cheeks turned pink. "Yeah. Me too." May sat at the table, already halfway through her first bite before Inko had even finished setting down the tray of drinks. "Man, katsudon is basically my favorite food," she mumbled through a mouthful of rice and pork. Izuku, who was just sitting down across from her, immediately snapped upright like someone had flipped a switch. "What? It's totally my favorite." May paused, chopsticks still halfway to her mouth, and grinned. "See, Greenie. Great minds. Obviously destined for high-speed success and high cholesterol bonding." Izuku flushed a little, scratching his cheek. "Well, my mom makes the best version, May jabbed her chopsticks in the air. Confirmed. 10 out of 10. I would fight someone over this meal. Inko beamed from the kitchen. You can come over for Katsudon any time, she said, clearly on the verge of happy tears. It had been a week since Meihatsum barreled into Izuku's life like a bolt launcher with no off swch. 7 days. 7 evenings filled with grease, gears, manic ideas, and Mei sitting cross-legged on his bedroom floor like she lived there. Inko had stopped asking after day 3. By day 5, she was just making extra food automatically. Izuku didn't complain. He couldn't, not when Mei had helped him fix nearly every flaw in the Mark I-3, rerouted the cooling system, reinforced the spine brace, and installed a modular glove core that responded to touch-based sensor commands. And not when she kept calling it, their baby. I think we should add a compact pressure tank, Mei said casually, one leg bouncing as she tapped at her tablet. Boost your jump range. Also, I have a proximity sensor we can cram into the wrist casing. You'll smell sneak attacks before they happen. I don't think it works like that, Izuku muttered, hunched over the boot module. Mei clicked her tongue. Details. She was here again, same as the last 6 days. Goggles on, hair frizzy, tool belt slung low. She'd arrived an hour after lunch, dropped her stuff with a shout of, I brought snacks and chaos, and immediately launched into another round of tweaks on what she now affectionately called, our appealing, burn-prone metal baby. Izuku sat across from her on the floor, tools scattered between them. She's coming together, Mei said, nudging the gauntlet toward him. Can't believe you were gonna run the exam in the old version. That thing was like 40% chance of combustion. 32, Izuku corrected without thinking. She smirked. Still not a good number, Greenie. He leaned over the gauntlet, turning it in his hands. It was sleeker now. More compact. More his. The plating curved smoother. The joints didn't hiss when they locked into place. He hadn't even realized how far the suit had come, how far he'd come, until he saw it through her eyes. Hey, Mei said, watching him. You nervous? Izuku hesitated, then nodded. Yeah. A little. Good, she said cheerfully. Means you care. He looked at her and smiled, soft and a little surprised. Thanks for all this. Really? You didn't have to help. She waved a hand. Please. I'd have been offended if you didn't let me help. You're my favorite build project right now. He laughed, quiet and a little awkward, but real. Mei grinned wider. Then her eyes lit up again. Oh. What if we added smoke vents to the shoulders? Like poof, instant intimidation. Izuku groaned, please no more vents. No promises. They'd been working for hours, again. The sun had dipped below the edge of the window, casting the room in soft orange and gold, but neither of them had moved to turn on the light. The only glow came from Izuku's desk lamp and the soft blue pulse of the suit's boot rig in standby mode. Mei was soldering something small and complicated, muttering about microshock dampeners, and how funny would it be if the soles did spark a little when he ran. Izuku was tightening the frame bolts when she suddenly said, completely unprompted, Hey, you care if I stay over? He froze mid-turn. I mean, we're on a tight deadline, she added, casually blowing smoke from the solder tip. I've got like 5 more ideas and I know you've got at least 3 you're not telling me about. My mom doesn't care as long as I text her. Would yours? Izuku stared at her like she'd grown a second set of goggles. I stay over. Mei finally looked up, blinking. Yeah. She tilted her head, thinking. Oh, do I need to bring pajamas or something? Or like a toothbrush? Or, wait, no, I have a travel kit in my backpack. I knew I packed that for a reason. I'd have to ask, Izuku mumbled, feeling his face heat up to dangerous levels. I mean, maybe. I don't think, my mom, As if summoned by fate itself, Inko knocked lightly at the door. Izuku, she said, poking her head in. Do you and May want dinner or? She trailed off, eyes bouncing from her son's flustered expression to May, who was now smiling up at her like this was completely normal. Midoriya-san, May said brightly, can I sleep over? I've got prototypes and your son needs supervision. Also, I have emergency snacks. Inko blinked. Once. Then smiled. Well, she said, hands on her hips, I was going to ask if you needed extra blankets. I'll go get them. Izuku made a noise that could only be described as a dying kettle sound. May grinned at him. See. She's a genius too. Later that evening, the house had gone quiet. Inko had gone to bed after making sure May had a toothbrush, a pillow, and approximately 5 different snacks, just in case you're the type who wakes up hungry. Izuku had tried to protest something, anything, but his brain had short-circuited somewhere around the moment May casually walked into his room in oversized sweatpants, sat down cross-legged on the floor, and immediately started dismantling a core module again. It was nearly midnight now. Izuku had given up on sleep entirely and was just lying on his bed, arms folded behind his head, watching May work under the desk lamp. She was muttering to herself again. Something about symmetry, and not enough personality, and this baby deserves flair. Then he heard the spray can hiss. He sat up. Wait, are you painting it? Enhancing, she said without looking back. He leaned over the edge of the bed and squinted. She was adding a thin stripe of green along the outside of the right gauntlet, just enough to catch the light. The color matched his eyes. His hoodie. His name. What's that for? He asked softly. She paused, still holding the Ken mid spray. Dunno, she said, voice casual. Just thought it could use a little you. Then she smirked. And it'll make you easier to spot if you eat pavement during the exam. Which you won't, because I enhanced you. Izuku didn't say anything for a moment. But the stripe glinted under the lamplight, soft and sharp. It was a small thing. But somehow, it meant everything. Thanks, he mumbled. Don't mention it, she said, clicking the paint cap back on. Seriously, don't. I have a rep to maintain. Izuku raised an eyebrow, still sitting up on the bed. You have a rep, May grinned as she sat back to admire the newly painted stripe. Obviously. I'm known across at least 4 tech forums as Hatsum the Menace. She counted them off on her fingers. One time I posted a design for a shockwave engine that made a guy puke through a VR headset. Another time I got banned from a support convention for starting a small, completely controlled fire. Izuku blinked. That's not what I thought you meant by reputation. Good, she said, already digging back into her parts box. Then it's working. He couldn't help it, he laughed. It bubbled out before he could stop it, light and tired and real. May looked up and smiled, tilting her head slightly like she was storing the sound away for later. I'm just saying, she added, tone a little softer now, I don't do boring. If I'm gonna help someone build their future, it better be cool, it better be chaotic, and it better leave scorch marks on the walls. She tapped the newly painted gauntlet with one gloved finger. Yours is shaping up to be really cool, Greenie. Izuku swallowed once, then nodded. Thanks. For, everything. May waved him off again. Don't go getting all sentimental on me. A beat. That's for after you survive the exam. They both went quiet for a moment. Izuku laid back down, staring up at the ceiling, thoughts spinning too fast to catch. He could still smell solder and oil in the air. The stripe of green on the gauntlet caught a flicker of light from his desk lamp. He closed his eyes, breathing slow. Just as he was about to drift off, hey. He opened one eye. May had propped her chin up on the edge of his bed, only her eyes and forehead peeking over the mattress. She was grinning. Let's test this baby out tomorrow. Izuku blinked. The suit. No, she said with a dramatic eye roll. Your emotional endurance under pressure. Yes, the suit. Duh. Full field test. Motion tracking, joint resistance, maybe a rooftop sprint if we don't get arrested. He laughed under his breath. Sounds intense. It will be. Can't send my favorite prototype into battle without seeing it fly first. She winked, then flopped back onto her pillow on the floor like nothing had happened. Izuku stared at the ceiling again, cheeks warm, smile soft. Tomorrow. It was getting real. But somehow, it didn't feel as scary anymore. Morning sunlight slipped through the curtains in soft golden streaks, painting the edges of the room in warmth. The desk lamp had been left on overnight, casting a faint glow over scattered blueprints, tools, and a disassembled wrist module. Izuku stirred, face buried half in his pillow, groggy and tangled in dreams about overheating suits and zero-pointers with flamethrowers. His arm dangled off the bed. And, unbeknownst to him, his hand had somehow ended up tangled with May's. She was still curled up in the blanket nest she'd made on the floor, one leg kicked halfway out, mouth open just a little, snoring softly. At some point during the night, her hand had grabbed his. Firm. Like she was holding onto a live wire and didn't want to let go. The door creaked open. Inko leaned in with her usual soft smile, ready to offer breakfast or a wake-up nudge. She took one look at the scene and let out a tiny, high-pitched "oh." Not loud, but sharp enough to stab the silence like a knife. Izuku bolted upright. Wah! May snorted and flinched, blinking rapidly. Ha! Is it exploding? Izuku stared down at her. Then his hand. Then her hand. Still holding his. Still warm. Oh my god, sorry, I didn't, did we? May yawned and squinted at the ceiling. Ha! Guess I grabbed you. You've got really soft fingers, Greenie. Like marshmallows. Inko was still frozen in the doorway, hands over her mouth, eyes wide with glee. I'll just make breakfast, she squeaked, then vanished down the hall. The sound of her retreating squeal of delight echoed faintly. Izuku collapsed onto his pillow with a strangled groan. I'm never living this down. May rolled over, completely unfazed. Could have been worse. I once woke up holding a power cell. That did explode. How are you like this? Engineering trauma. May yawned again, stretching out her arms as Izuku tried to bury his face into his blanket and disappear from existence. She glanced down at their still connected hands, then casually gave his fingers a squeeze. How are your hands so soft, anyway? She asked, like she was asking about the weather. I figured they'd be all rough and calloused by now. Izuku sputtered, jerking his hand back like it had been burned. Well, I mean, they used to be worse. But I wear gloves when I solder. And I use lotion, because the flux dries out my skin, and my mom buys the good kind. May blinked up at him. Then grinned. You're kinda cute when you panic. He made a noise somewhere between a wheeze and a whimper and pulled his blanket over his head. She flopped back onto the pillow, still smiling. I was just curious, Greenie. Relax. You've got nice hands. Practical, soft, slightly tragic. 10 definitely support hands turned hero. Please stop rating my hands. Never. After breakfast, which involved 3 helpings of katsudon, 2 near spills, and Inko definitely not watching them like a reality show judge panel, May stretched her arms and let out a loud sigh of satisfaction. All right. That was the best meal I've had all week, which means it's officially time to go risk bodily harm for science. Inko blinked from the kitchen. Please be careful. No promises. May chirped, already grabbing her backpack and jogging down the hall. Izuku sighed into his tea. 10 minutes later, Mei came out of the bathroom dressed in her usual gear, tool belt, heavy-duty boots, wild hair tamed only slightly by her goggles. She looked like a small-scale demolition team. Izuku had swapped out his sleep clothes for his test outfit too, black compression gear under his reinforced undersuit, boots double-knotted, gloves checked twice. He stood by his armor case, staring at the Mark I-3 like it might bite him. Mei appeared beside him and nudged him lightly with her elbow. "You ready?" He hesitated. Then nodded. "As ready as I'll ever be." She grinned. "Good. Because I brought a drone to record it and possibly stream it to the tech forums." "Please don't stream it to the tech forums. We'll see how it goes." They stepped out the front door a few minutes later, duffel bag slung over Izuku's shoulder, gear jostling inside. The sky was clear, sun high, and the city stretched wide around them like a waiting stage. "You sure about the roof of the abandoned parking structure?" Izuku asked. Mei was already bouncing ahead of him. "It's got open space, concrete support beams, and exactly the kind of risk level that makes testing fun. Also, no one goes there. Perfect conditions." That last part was the only comforting thing you said. She turned around and flashed him a bright, fearless smile. "Trust me, Greenie. If this baby's gonna fly, today's the day." The rooftop was quiet. A little wind swept across the wide, open concrete, rattling loose gravel near the edges. Rusted railings framed the space, and old paint still marked faded parking lines from another era. Mei dropped her backpack with a thud and kicked open the armor case like she was unveiling a treasure chest. "All right, baby," she said, crouching beside it with a glint in her eye, "let's get you dressed." Izuku stood stiffly nearby, hands half-curled at his sides, heart thudding way harder than it needed to. "Usually I do this part alone," he said quietly. Mei was already snapping open the gauntlet casing. She glanced up. "Yeah, well. That's dumb." Izuku blinked. "What?" She stood and pointed a wrench at him like it was a sword. "Why wrestle into something this heavy and complex by yourself when you've got a genius right here with fully functional hands and a vested interest in not letting you fall apart midair?" He opened his mouth to argue. But she was already stepping closer, holding out the lower arm rig. "Left first." Izuku hesitated. Then nodded and extended his arm. The gauntlet slid on smoother than ever before. Mei crouched beside him, adjusting the clamps, carefully securing each strap with practiced ease. He swallowed. The last time he'd done this, it took him 10 minutes, a pulled shoulder, and he'd burned himself twice on the inner core panel. Now, her hands moved with certainty. No second guessing. She reached for the chest HRNSS next. "This part locks tight," she murmured, voice closer now as she stepped behind him. "Breathe out so it doesn't choke you." He did. The HRNSS clicked into place across his ribs. Snug. Supportive. Not painful. She was so close he could hear her breath. Smelled faint grease and lemon soap. His hands twitched at his sides. Mei stepped around to his front, tightened the collar plate, and didn't even flinch when her knuckles brushed his neck. He did, though. "You okay?" she asked, adjusting the final plate at his shoulder. "Why yeah," he said, a little too fast. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Then softened. "You're not used to someone helping you." It wasn't a question. He looked down. "Not really, no." Mei stepped back a little, but not far. "Well," she said, brushing a bit of dust off the chest plate. "Get used to it, Greenie. 'Cause this baby isn't a one-person project anymore." He looked up. She smiled, not manic, not chaotic. Just sincere. It hit harder than any upgrade. "Thanks," he murmured. Mei tapped the visor with her knuckle. Thank me by not faceplanting mid-jump. Now let's boot this sucker up. Mei took a few steps back, squinting up at him like a proud mechanic watching her Frankenstein creation stretch its limbs. Alright, she said, hands on her hips. Moment of truth. Izuku stood still, every strap and plate secured, the weight of the armor settling across his body like a second skin, only this time, it didn't feel like it was crushing him. It felt right. Mostly. Kind of. Nervous sweat was already forming under his gloves. Okay, he said, drawing a slow breath. Let's just pray it doesn't explode. Mei shot him a thumbs up, already holding her phone out like a film director. Don't worry. I've got 119 on speed dial. Wait, you what? Power it up, Greenie. Izuku groaned softly. Then, with a shaky exhale, he pressed the activation node embedded just beneath his collar plate. The suit hummed to life. First came the low thrumming of the core stabilizer. Then a pulse as the boot rig locked into gear, shifting the weight distribution down his legs. The gauntlets lit faintly, pale green across the joints, and his HUD flickered on, flooding his left eye with status indicators. Mark I, 3 engaged. Core temp, nominal. Stabilizer calibration, 87%. Power distribution, stable. Izuku stood perfectly still as the systems ran their self-check. Then, hiss. A vent released a puff of steam from the back plate. Mei clapped. Yes. She lives. Izuku flexed his fingers. The joints moved smoother than ever. The gauntlets responded instantly. No delay. No burn. No short. He took one step forward. No pain. Another. Still stable. I think it's working, he breathed. Mei was practically vibrating. It's working. Oh, Greenie. Let's break physics. He stood there a moment longer, letting the suit hum around him, the warm wind brushing over his visor. It was quiet. No crackling wires. No pain biting at his joints. No errors blinking across his HUD. Just stability. And it hit him then, how many times he'd stood like this alone. Late at night in his room, wrapping cables with burned fingers. In junkyards, fitting pieces together with shaking hands and no one to tell him if it would ever be enough. Every test. Every failure. Every scraped knee and scorched palm. He'd done so much on his own. But now, he wasn't alone. Mei was crouched by the rail, hands covered in oil, eyes bright behind her goggles as she adjusted the drone settings with one hand and shoveled Pocky into her mouth with the other. And somehow, this insane, fearless, chaotic genius had taken his fragile dream and helped turn it into something real. He felt like he'd learned more in 1 week with her than in a whole year of struggling by himself. He adjusted his stance, flexing his knees, feeling the weight shift naturally through the suit. It didn't feel like armor anymore. It felt like possibility. And for once, he wasn't terrified of it. Mei stood up from the drone rig and cracked her knuckles with a grin that was both excited and vaguely threatening. Alright, Greenie, she called out. We're live. Everything's recording. Let's push this baby and see what she can really do. Izuku shifted his weight, still getting used to how much smoother the boots handled. So, where do we start? Mei spun a wrench in her fingers and pointed dramatically across the rooftop. Okay. Test 1, sprint boost. I wanna see how fast the leg stabilizers snap into motion under pressure. Hit the edge of the roof and back, full throttle. He blinked. You want me to sprint at a ledge? Don't fall off, she said cheerfully. I didn't bring a grappling hook. Yet. He sighed, took a breath, and ran. The stabilizers hissed and flared as his boots launched forward, energy snapping through the frame. The wind whipped against his faceplate. He reached the rooftop edge and pivoted hard, heart thudding, legs catching the motion without buckling. He skidded to a halt back where he started, a bit breathless. "Good," May shouted, scribbling something down on her tablet. "Shoulder plate jittered on the turn but your weight held. Okay, test 2, impact absorption. Jump, land hard. Right leg first. I wanna see if the new padding compress is right. You want me to jump, on purpose." "Greenie," she said, "this is science." He groaned and crouched, then launched upward with a hiss of pressure from the boots, higher than expected, arms flailing slightly before he came down in a sharp one-legged landing. It hurt, but in a contained way. No grinding pop, no shudder through the knee. Just a low shock that rippled clean through the armor. He steadied himself. That was amazing. May beamed, practically glowing. "You bounced like a dream." "Wasn't trying to. Bonus points anyway." "Okay, test 3, try a side roll and spring up again. Let's see how fast you can reset movement with the gauntlet weight. Are we testing a suit or training for a boss fight? Why not both?" Izuku shook his head, smiling as he moved into position. "You're unbelievable." May gave him a thumbs up, already prepping the next test. "And you're killin' it, Greenie. Let's keep going." "Alright," May said, tapping her pen against her clipboard like a metronome. "Test 4, lateral spin, gauntlet activation. I wanna see how the balance holds if you throw your weight around mid-motion." Izuku took a breath and rolled his shoulders, shifting in the suit. It felt lighter now than it ever had, almost like it was waiting for him to do something more. "I don't really have a target," he called out. "Should I just swing at the air?" May's grin widened. "Be creative." He nodded once. Then ran. 2 quick strides. A jump. Mid-air, he twisted, torso leading, one boot kicking out while he activated the left gauntlet's short burst thruster. It flared, spinning him with extra force. His foot hit the ground and skidded in a half circle, the suit adjusting instinctively. The gauntlet retracted with a hiss of steam. May hooped. "Yeah. That was sick. You just did a full 360 reset. I didn't even program that into the balance test." Izuku was panting, just a little. But his eyes were sharp now. The next motion wasn't planned, he just moved. A sudden forward dash into a shoulder drop, twisting onto his side, kicking up with both legs, flipping himself back to his feet. He hit the ground with one hand and activated the microshock in the palm for stability. Boom. Dust puffed out beneath him. He landed in a crouch, visor flickering slightly from the sudden jolt. May's pen dropped from her hand. That wasn't in the test list either. Izuku looked up, chest rising and falling. "I've been watching Heroes since I was 5, he said softly. "I used to take notes on every move I saw. I memorized fight patterns. Impact angles. Escape rolls. But I never had a way to use them." He stood slowly, the armor groaning faintly around his legs. "Until now." May stared at him. Then let out a low whistle. "Greenie, you just made that baby yours. That wasn't a field test. That was a flex." He gave a shaky laugh, surprised even at himself. "I didn't even know I could do that." "Well now you do," she said, eyes gleaming. "So let's see what else is hiding in there." They were on a high. Izuku stood tall in the center of the rooftop, chest heaving with exertion, the HUD flickering data he hadn't even had time to read. The suit was responding like it never had before, like it wasn't resisting him anymore, but moving with him. May was practically vibrating. Okay, she shouted from behind the camera drone, nearly hopping in place. "Let's try low-fly mode. We never tested it under full power, but this is exactly what it was made for." Izuku tilted his head. "Low fly. Isn't that just Micromove assisted air dash with ankle tilt correction, she shouted. That sounds like something that could blow my legs off. It's fine, she waved wildly. It won't go too high unless you hold the charge. Just do a quick burst, see if it can lift and catch your landing. Izuku exhaled and double-checked the setting. Okay. Here goes. He shifted his stance, tapped the wrist command, and engaged low-fly mode. There was a soft hiss, a click, then, boom. The thrusters flared way too strong, rocketing him 10 feet into the air like a launched missile. Whoa, nope. Mei's jaw dropped. Wait, I didn't program that much move. For a second, Izuku floated at the peak of his arc. The suit's hover dampeners kicked in, then immediately failed. The HUD blinked red. Stabilizer error. Core misfire. Freefall detected. OCRP, he slammed into the rooftop. And went straight through it. A cloud of dust exploded from the building as shattered metal and old plaster rained down into the empty warehouse floor below. Mei screamed. Izuku. She was already moving, full sprint to the fire escape, practically flinging herself down the steps 3 at a time, heart slamming so loud she couldn't hear herself breathe. Please be okay, I didn't mean to kill him, I just wanted him to fly. She burst into the building's side door, boots skidding on the concrete. Izuku. She spotted the crater in the floor and sprinted over, kneeling hard beside the heap of bent armor, cracked concrete and dust. Come on, talk to me. She grabbed the helmet latch and ripped it off with both hands. Izuku was underneath, blinking through debris, dirt smeared across his cheek, and laughing. Mei stared. You're laughing. He let out another wheezy chuckle, coughing dust. Ow. Okay. That SCKED. Mei choked on her breath, hands trembling. You fell through a roof. I thought you were dead. Before she could spiral again, Izuku reached up, grabbed her wrist, and pulled her into a shaky, full-body hug. She froze. Then she clutched his shoulders and practically collapsed into him. You absolute dumbass, she whispered, half laughing, half crying. He nodded against her. I know. They sat there in the dust, armor dented, hands still shaking, helmets off. And then, both at once, they burst out laughing. Loud. Breathless. Exhausted. Mei wiped her eyes, still smiling. Okay, next time. We maybe test the hover core before strapping you into it. Izuku grinned up at the hole in the roof above. Deal. After the laughter faded and the dust started to settle, Izuku winced as he shifted in the crumpled heap of his armor. Mei sat up beside him, eyes suddenly wide. Oh my god, she gasped, crawling over him. Let's make sure the baby's okay. He blinked. I just fell through a roof. I know, and you're squishy. The suit is hardware. Priorities, Greenie. He groaned and started peeling off the gauntlets while Mei knelt beside him, already inspecting the outer plating with a flashlight from her belt. The right leg module had a bend in the lower brace, and one of the boot stabilizers had been half-sheared on impact, but, no core rupture, she muttered. No power leaks, no actuator snaps. Damage is all cosmetic. We are solid. She let out a breath and beamed. She took a hit like a champ. Izuku finally managed to slide free of the chest HRNSS, wincing slightly as the armor hissed and released. He leaned back against a wall, panting. Mei sat beside him, nudging his knee. Honestly. For a total system misfire and accidental gravity slam, this went way better than expected. He snorted. Better than expected. She shrugged. You didn't die. The baby's fine. That's, like, an A- in Hatsum physics. He laughed again, rubbing at the back of his neck. Thanks, for coming down. For, not leaving me in a crater. She rolled her eyes. Please. You think I wouldn't break into a building to make sure you weren't dead? You're my test pilot. They looked at the bent plating for a long moment, side by side in the broken silence. Then May stood and clapped her hands. All right. Let's take this stuff back to your place. Nothing a little hammering and heat spreading won't fix. She reached for one of the bent arm pieces, but Izuku caught her wrist. Wait, he said, voice low and suddenly serious. Let's maybe not tell my mom what happened. She blinked. Why? He stared at her, deadpan. She might literally keel over. May paused. Then grinned wide. Got it. Operation, stealth debrief is a go. I'll just say we tested stabilization substructures and you tripped gracefully. That's not better. Too late, it's already the official story. He shook his head, dragging the suitcase upright again. I'm gonna get grounded before the entrance exam. She leaned close and patted his shoulder. Don't worry, Greenie. If she kills you, I'll build you a mech body. That actually does worry me.